not here when the rest of us. I arrived almost only a few moments before the service today, so coming is the point, and thank you all for being here. I'm grateful for that. Pam, you asked us to ask what we're grateful for. I'm truly grateful for this community. It's made all the difference in my life from the very first day I walked through those doors. So this is part 2 of a 3-part series on abundance as presented in Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity, and how ideas from these great spiritual traditions have been embraced by the New Thought movement and in unity. This talk focuses on Hinduism and the realization of our oneness with God as the path leading to the experience of abundance and happiness. Now, we've all heard the term oneness, and it's used a lot in unity, and by many New Thought teachers and speakers. And because of this, it might seem like it's a relatively new idea. But the truth is that human beings have been experiencing this feeling and attempting to describe and understand it since the dawn of civilization. The inspiration that oneness with God is not just possible, but is in actuality the way the universe works, was first presented in the Hindu Vedas. Now, Veda means knowledge. And the Vedas are considered by many scholars and historians to be the oldest thoughts and ideas about God and religion that we know of. Now, saying that without providing any context or clarification, it could lead you to think that the statement itself isn't true. Because from a purely archaeological standpoint, we can point at written language that is far older than any version of anything we have from Hinduism. Sumerian cuneiform was first found on ancient tablets discovered in Mesopotamia, which is now modern-day Iraq. And it has been considered and dated to be over 5,000 years old and is the oldest example of written language that we know of. Some historians date the first compilation of the Rig Veda, the first of the 4 Vedas, to be about 3,500 years old. But the oldest written manuscript and version of anything from the Vedas only dates back about 1,000 years. And those were on palm leaves and birch bark parchments. So if the Rig Veda is, at least by these ideas, only 3,500 years old, and the cuneiform tablets are 5,000 years old, how could the ideas presented in the Vedas be older than that? Well, it's because the dating that was used to consider how old these teachings are relied on old assumptions and failed to take into account references in the ancient Hindu society itself, references in the Vedas themselves, and new scientific discoveries made in recent years. Now, regarding the ancient Hindu society, the Vedas were initially preserved through the tradition of oral tradition. In other words, the spoken word over the millennia. And the reason for this is that there were strict religious rules that forbid they be written. Now, you might ask yourself, if these ideas were so important, why would it be forbidden for them to be written down? I mean, in our culture, the most trivial musings and ideas are written down, and the writings and teachings that we consider the oldest and the most influential, important to human history, are protected in vaults and archives. So we have to look at the culture that created the Vedas and understand that they were different in two key ways and concepts that explain their reasonings and beliefs of preserving an oral tradition. Hindu sacred texts are divided into two main categories. Shruti, S-H-R-U-T-I, means that which is heard. Smriti, S-M-R-I-T-I, means that which is remembered. Shruti comprises the divine, eternal revelations received by sages that were preserved strictly by being spoken. So when we do say oral tradition, that's what we mean, spoken, not written. The spoken word was considered to be alive and powerful, where the written word was thought to have had the life and inspiration taken from it. And by speaking and hearing the truth and power of these divine revelations, the speaker and the listener experiences it directly. Now, the Vedas contain a lot of words. And because of this, it's hard for many people and even scholars to actually imagine that they could have memorized them all. And that's not an unreasonable thought. Let alone pass these words and ideas down through generations and generations and generations. But it was actually a lot easier than you might think. Because the words weren't just memorized and spoken, they were songs. Even the Bhagavad Gita, which we'll be talking about later, is often referred to as the song of the soul, the song of God. And, we all have songs we know and love. I will bet that there are songs that you know, that when you hear them, you remember where you were the first time that you heard it, you remember what you were doing, you remember how it made you feel. When we sing here the hymns in church, many of them we've been singing for years. We know them by heart. We look at the hymnal if we need a little reference, but in general, we're singing them as a group because we're devoted. We're a loving community. We're participating in this together. Songs create that powerful, lasting memory. And when you consider that these ancient songs were the foundation of their beliefs and sung with passion and inspiration, just like we did, in sacred places in the churches of their day, it's not hard to believe that they kept these ideas alive and consistent from generation to generation. Now, Smriti consists of the traditional human-authored texts, like the Bhagavad Gita. And to illustrate why oral traditions are considered to be, let's use the word, more accurate or faithful to the original idea versus being written down, we have to really realize that the Gita and the Bible, there are hundreds of different versions of the Bible. Did you know that? I mean, you can look online at the New International Tradition and the New Living Version and the Aramaic Version and the King James Version, whichever version you want to look at. They're required by law to be a certain percentage different from one another in order to be considered their own separate thing. Think about that. So why do you see it written one way in one version and one way in another? It's because there are requirements, and it's up to the person doing the translation, their interpretation. An oral tradition and a song conveys the words and ideas and inspiration exactly as the sage that first experienced it shared it with their community. So this is why these oral traditions were so powerful and have been preserved for so long. Now, the Vedas also include references to the Saraswati River, not the Ganges River that we all know of in India today. And they refer to the Saraswati as the goddess and provider of all life. Now, for many years, the Saraswati River was thought of only as a myth or a legend. And as a result, those dating numbers that I gave you earlier, they were assigned to the Vedas based on the archaeological evidence found along the banks of the Ganges River, which is what supported the 3,500-year-old date. Because that's what we could point at. You know, when we're trying to figure this stuff out, it's important to be able to point at it. Don't you think? Not just say we think it's like this, but what does the evidence really show? Because if I'm going to talk about oneness or anything else, I appreciate it when, if you are valuing my opinion, that's wonderful. I hope that that's so. But I'm much more committed to making sure I can back up what I say. Because you should be able to verify and point at and see for yourself. Oneness is about believing and devotion and understanding. And that really only happens when you feel it, when you know it in your heart. And so, to support this idea of that the Saraswati was actually a real thing, new satellite imagery and sediment research by bodies like the ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization, and NASA have revealed dry paleochannels that were once mighty rivers that flowed under what is now the Thar Desert today. And these channels align perfectly with the ancient descriptions of the Saraswati found in the Vedas. The imagery also confirms that geological and climate changes, including tectonic shifts, altered the course of the Saraswati, causing it to dry up around 4,000 years ago. Right? This catastrophic event meant that the entire Hindu population was uprooted, and it took hundreds of years before it was finally reestablished along the banks of the Ganges River. Now, this kind of example, where a culture essentially stopped for hundreds of years and then formed again, is not isolated to the example I just pointed at. It's actually been proven to have occurred in ancient Egypt. There's a period of hundreds of years where science has confirmed the Nile essentially dried up. And there is no archaeological evidence, or better said, a distinct lack of archaeological evidence showing any kind of substantive and organized culture. Then, after this long period of drought, the archaeological evidence shows that the Egyptian culture formed again and began anew. Now, taking all of this into account suggests that the thoughts and ideas presented in the Vedas are much older than originally thought, with some scholars and historians suggesting dates of at least 5,000 years old, and some 6,000 or 7,000 years old. Think about that. Here we are today talking about the idea of oneness, and it is essentially the same feeling, experience that human beings have been pondering since there has been what we can point at as a civilization. There's got to be truth to it, or we wouldn't keep talking about it. So now, after the history lesson, let's talk about the concept of oneness. Oneness refers to the state of being one, unified, whole, not separate. Great teachers and thinkers throughout time have talked about it and affirmed again and again that it is the truth of our existence. Jesus said in John 10:30, "The Father and I are one." And if you've read your handout today, you'll notice that we're going to sing those very words in just a little while after the talk. And from a purely scientific aspect, when we consider the total energy of a system, just say the Earth, the total energy of the system that makes up the Earth, we're part of that total system of energy. We are not separate from it. Physics has even discovered the concept and idea of quantum entanglement and proven that it's a real thing. You know, it occurs when two or more particles become inextricably linked. When this happens, the physical state of one particle instantaneously affects the state of the other particle, no matter how vast the difference and the separation is. But still, if oneness was so easy to understand and believe, we wouldn't need to be talking about it. I mean, we'd all just say, well, yeah, of course, we're all one. Everybody knows that, right? But we look around the world and we see the troubles, the upsets, the disagreements. That confirms that there is a vast majority of us that don't believe we're all one. And if you've ever experienced a health challenge where others seem fully healthy and well, or your bank account is low, and you can obviously see others with plenty, it becomes even harder to believe. So let's consider some ideas that can help us. Hinduism is founded on the belief that life is a cosmic play, and it's unfolding in a universe made up of Brahman, God. Each of us is an actor who has forgotten our true self, the Atman, an individual expression of God, and the world around us is an illusion called Maya. Maya makes us believe that this false role we're playing is who we really are. And our experience of consistent abundance and happiness is determined by the degree to which we free ourselves from this delusion and realize our oneness with God. And from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse 27, Krishna said to Arjuna, his disciple, "Great transcendental happiness comes to the yogi whose mind is calm, whose passions are subdued, who lives in truth, and who sees everything in connection to God." Now, this verse highlights the transition from a restless mind to profound spiritual awakening. So let's consider the principles at work here. Calm mind. When the mind stops chasing external objects and mental distractions, it becomes tranquil and clear. The foundational practice presented in the Gita is the same that we've practiced today: meditation. And while there are many different ways to meditate, the practice, in general, is intended to help calm the mind so we can perceive and experience our oneness with the divine. Subdued passions. As we practice meditation and right behaviors, we also come to helpful realizations where restless and selfish tendencies are quieted and eliminate frustration and attachment. Now, for me, I've come to realize that some of the ideas and causes and things that used to seem so important to me that I would argue over, I would defend, I would protect as the right way, the only way. Ever felt that way? Right? Well, I've come to realize and feel now that so many of them just feel unimportant. As a matter of fact, some feel so trivial, I just wonder how it was that I ever was so attached to them. Living in truth, essentially becoming one with Brahman, one with God. By detaching from temporary illusions, the yogi realizes their true spiritual identity resides in the Absolute. It's said that the ultimate realization is that the Atman is Brahman. Essentially, that the truth of our being is that we are God. This body, your body, everyone's body is just a physical manifestation of God experiencing itself. Now, while we see these ideas and we're speaking about Hinduism, Charles Fillmore said in his book Prosperity, when he referred to Jesus and his teachings in the Gospel of Luke, he said, Luke and the parable of the lost son, he said, poverty or prosperity. It all depends on you. All that the Father has is yours, but you alone are responsible for the relationship of the Father's good to your life. Through conscious recognition of your oneness with the Father and His abundance, you draw the living substance into visible supply. Fillmore's beliefs were based on several core ideas for the reasons that we may not be experiencing oneness. Now, these include delusion of the senses. He taught that because God is the singular, perfect, omnipresent force in the universe, any condition perceived as evil, lacking, or diseased is simply a misinterpretation by our five physical senses. He said, the inexhaustible resource of spirit is equal to every demand. There is no reality in lack. Abundance is here and now, manifest. A belief in separateness. He considered the belief in a personal, independent self, separated from the divine, to be the root cause of all ignorance and suffering. He practiced meditation, and he taught us to do the same when he said, "Be still and turn within to the great source." Truth, overcoming delusion. Through affirmative prayer, meditation, and by denying the reality of lack or sickness, individuals can align their subconscious minds with divine perfection. He believed this mental alignment could literally heal the body and transform one's life. He said, "Deny that lack has any place or reality in your thoughts or affairs, and affirm plenty as the only appearance." And he and Myrtle Fillmore are both living examples of miraculous healing that occurred through faith and devotion to God. And this is well documented. And this leads us to an essential part of experiencing oneness: devotion. Devotion to God. The Bhagavad Gita itself is considered Bhakti Yoga. Yoga means union. Bhakti, B-H-A-K-T-I, is a Sanskrit term that translates to devotion, loving attachment, committed engagement towards the divine. It's a central concept in Hinduism, representing the spiritual path of cultivating a deep, emotional, and loving personal relationship with God. So when we're struggling to feel a connection with God, or to see God in everything, perhaps we need to consider our own beliefs, our own behaviors, our own thoughts, because really, they do show devotion, just not the devotion in the way that will help us. So often we have beliefs that we are so attached to, that we are so sure are helping, and the way to help us move forward and be our best. And we're so sure that oftentimes we stop looking at them, and that is when we really are setting ourselves up for failure. We stop looking at assumptions we made long ago and really asking ourselves, is that true? Does that serve? Is that helping me? Is that preventing me from realizing my highest good? Now, Hinduism teaches us that we struggle with believing in oneness due to Maya. Maya completely blinds us to the truth, and unless we're diligent and practice and commit ourselves to believing in oneness, our life experience is subject to the ever-changing circumstances of the world. Today, I'm happy. Tomorrow, I notice what they're doing and I'm unhappy. Today, I feel great. Tomorrow, oh my gosh, I just can't get over how that person spoke to me. Understanding and believing and being devoted and practicing the things that promote this feeling of oneness is how we become even-minded. The Gita talks about the person, the sage, that is even-minded in pleasure or in pain, in praise or in blame, sees gold and dirt with the same value. Sounds difficult. And without practicing and working on this each day and keeping this focus within our hearts, our experiences are subject to change like the seasons. Now, I'll close with a story that Alan Watts tells that explains the power and experience of Maya. And the two characters in this story are Narada. Now, Narada is a revered sage and son of Brahma and devoted messenger of the Lord Vishnu. Now, Vishnu can be thought of as the manifestation of God. And really, we can, if we want, consider it the same way as the Gita, Krishna and Arjuna, God talking to his disciple, the teacher teaching his student. And the story goes like this. Narada asks Vishnu, "What is Maya?" Vishnu takes Narada over to a pool that appears to be filled with water and throws him in. Instantly, Narada forgets who he is and everything about his life and experiences, and is now in the process of being born. He has a new name and is now a princess in a royal family. She learns to recognize her parents, her brothers and sisters, and is raised in the kingdom and the culture she has been born into. As she matures and comes of age, she marries a prince from a neighboring kingdom, and they're happy. They're prosperous. They're living a wonderful life. Then one day, they're attacked by another kingdom, and theirs is utterly destroyed. Even her husband is killed in the battle. And as she is filled with grief and crying and about to throw herself onto his funeral pyre, Vishnu raises Narada out of the pool. For a moment, Narada is bewildered and still sobbing. But as he regains his composure and remembers who he really is, Vishnu asks him, "Who was it that you were grieving for?" This life and the world that we live is designed to distract us. That's the setup. It's intended to convince us that we're separate, not one, not the same. In certain ways, perhaps it is, in fact, this feeling of separateness that is the motivating energy that keeps life going, struggling, living. I need to eat. I need clothing. I need shelter. I don't want you to hurt me. I want to have more little ones just like me. So it is not unreasonable that the setup of separateness is the way it starts out for all of us. But if we want to believe that we're one with God, and we still have doubts, it means that at least we're on the right path. And Charles Fillmore gave us encouragement to persevere with our practice and devotion when he said this: "We do not have to wait until we have fully entered the kingdom or attain a complete understanding of spirit before prosperity begins to manifest. But we do have to seek. We do have to turn attention in that direction. Then things begin to be added unto us." So the more that we identify ourselves with being one with everything, seeing God in everything, and as the ultimate source of unlimited good and love, the more abundance and happiness we experience ourselves. Thank you very much. Love and blessings to you all. Light of God.